Hey everyone, it's Ryan Lizza with Tellus News with my friend Steve Schmidt of The Warning. Steve, hope you had a good weekend. Let's let some people come into the chat for a second here before we get into the serious stuff. How was your weekend, except for all the crazy shit that was going on in the world?
It was a good weekend. It was hot. I dropped a cell phone, my iPhone, into the water
Ooh,
and
your
knocked it
water.
off of a boat, fumblerooski, and dealing with that. I couldn't remember any of my passwords um, for some inexplicable reason. The way that my attention deficit disorder works, I procrastinated for many years about the need to write them down. And so I've learned the lesson the hard way and rebuilding from there, Ryan. Rebuilding
Not
from there.
not the operational security I expected out
No,
from you. It was good to see you. Good to see you in DC last week. We had a very enjoyable evening.
we did.
Uh, so you're back home. I can see by the artwork. Um, and let's get some more people in here.
Yeah, I
We're
am. I'll
seven.
tell you, when I saw you last week, and I don't,
You saw me in
I
a strange state. I had walked 2 miles in the rain with an extremely reluctant puppy, and by the time I arrived at that restaurant, I was absolutely drenched with a
could not have
miser.
been more wet.
I could not have more been more wet, more miserable, and with a very miserable dog.
Hmm.
So it was quite
Hmm.
it was quite an entrance.
Hmm. It was. It was. Um, and one of the things I said to you, as we're waiting, for the crowd to build a little bit, is I had walked around Washington. I'd given a friend of mine a tour of the city, and we went to all the monuments. He actually announced his Senate campaign today in the state of Texas. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But we were walking around from the Capitol on down, and just the amount of waste for the Trump parade in Washington, which in Trump time at some level now feels like it was 8 Trump eons ago.
Long
Uh,
time ago.
the cleanup was just astonishing to behold. All of the infrastructure that went into this guy's vanity and how much military presence there just was left in the aftermath of it to be involved in the cleanup. I mean, it's just amazing. What a waste of money, astonishing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was not only a waste of money, but it was a poor. The way the money was spent uh, it was mismanaged. I mean, the parade itself was a flop just because it wasn't a good parade. I mean, forget all the other stuff. They just, I don't think they'll be doing another one of those anytime soon. Um, so, Steve, let's get into it. Let's get into it. I have a lot of thoughts on Iran, and my first one is about how people who don't trust for good reasons, don't like for good reasons, um, think that he has been a lawless president, has abused his power, um, and should not be trusted with any more power. How people like that, um, who, on the other hand, support taking out the Iranian nuclear program, and I'm not one of those people on either front, or I'm not one of those on the latter. I don't think this is a good idea, but I have noticed some people who I think have very good judgment about Trump. That is, they think he's lawless, don't trust him, but also think this was the right thing to do and are supporting this or did support this mission. And I want to talk. I want to ask you about because and I don't know exactly how you feel about the Iranian program and what we should do about it in general. But how those people should react. My view of this is um, just because you support something like this in general does not mean that giving what you know about Trump, and I'm talking about people with what I view as good judgment about this person, um, you shouldn't lend your support to this mission. And it reminds me a little bit, Steve, 10 years ago when I first started reporting on Donald Trump, I would talk to social conservatives. Why do you support Donald Trump? He's nothing, he's not the most important thing in your life are Christian values. And, you go through the whole litany and how Trump is not like them in any way. And you started to hear this argument that they didn't care about him personally, what people on the right, what conservatives wanted, especially Christian conservatives in the beginning, they just wanted someone to go to Washington as a battering ram for their issue. For them, it was for God, for position to abortion. And there was just this argument that we don't give a shit about all of his character defects, the abuses of power, the lack of interest or understanding in the Constitution, and the willingness to shred it. We just want him to go do our stuff. That argument, which was novel and kind of crazy at the time, spread to the entire Republican Party. Anyone who had an issue just put all of those things aside as long as Trump they could get Trump to do something for them on their issue. And that's what I see right now with people who are hawkish on Iran, support the state of Israel, and think that it's important that this program be destroyed. They are putting aside all of their doubts, qualms, in some cases hatred of Trump, and saying, but on this, I'm with him and I want him to do it. And I don't want to name names, but I've just, seen a bunch of people in the media, people I respect and admire in some cases, doing a version of this person is flawed in every single way imaginable, but I'm okay with him on this. There's my little soliloquy.
So life,
Eugene
life
Mraz.
is
It was a soliloquy, Eugene.
life is life is complex, and we live in an age of idiocy where we're led by simpletons, and so we have to talk about complexity here. So there are a couple immutable characteristics that are at play here. And the first is the immutable characteristics of the Iranian regime. The second is the immutable characteristics of the Trump regime. And these two things are in conflict. So let's start with the Iranians. This is a despotic, theocratic, extremist, repressive political regime that is drenched in the blood of Americans going back 40 years. They are a threat to the peace of the world. They are the number one state sponsor of terrorism in the world. They are the great destabilizer of peace from Tehran across the Levant, a vast stretch of geography where they have sown chaos and terror, and they are responsible for terror campaigns from Argentina to Europe to the Middle East to the United States. And so that if anybody could wave a wand and make the mullahs disappear, that's good. And if anybody could wave a wand or drop a magic bomb or 12 and make the program disappear, all for it.
Yep.
So let's
Agree with
get
all of
into
that.
a reality based conversation, which is that the prerequisite for any military strike isn't the statutory authority, which the president has. And Democrats are making a feeble argument when they invoke the war powers debate as if we're in the post Vietnam era. The reality is that the Congress is a Politburo. The feckless Democratic leaders under Chuck Schumer have not asserted their prerogatives, have not asserted their power. have not asserted their co-equality as a co-equal branch of government. And now they're screaming about war powers. At the same time, you have people on television cheering the dropping of ordnance. And so now we have a new political reporters. They're all on television talking about the massive ordnance penetrator, um, who don't know the difference between the Marine Corps and the Navy by uniform, or the Air Force and the Coast Guard, and between the silver oak leaf and the gold one, and which is a major and which is a lieutenant colonel, are all of a sudden now experts in this ordnance, of which, by the way, the United States had 20 in the arsenal, 12 of them are gone. Okay, so let's just stop right there for 1 second. We dropped 12 of these bombs, and Donald Trump comes out and he says we've obliterated the program. And Pete Hegseth says we've obliterated the program. But the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the four-star Air Force general, does not agree. And what he says is we have to assess the damage from the bombing. And the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency says we have to assess the damage from the bombing.
Right.
Right. And so then the Secretary of State goes on television yesterday and he says, well, we're not engaged in a war of regime change. And the National Intelligence Director goes out and says this isn't about regime change. And the vice president refutes those who say we're at war with Iran, saying we're at war with Iran's nuclear program. And then a few hours later, Donald Trump on his True Social tweets out, my God, makes Iran great again, calling for regime change. So this is a mountainous country with 93 million people that we sent 125 aircraft to attack and dropped 12 of the largest ordnance that out of the 20 that we had. And we have an indeterminate result. We don't know what happened. So Field Marshal Jesse Waters and Field Marshal Hannity and Field Marshal whomever at Fox News, they all have dusted off the epaulets and they all have the war paint out. And they sound a lot like, to me, the people from 2003.
100%.
But but but
No
this
lessons
time,
learned.
right, ignoring the plain lessons learned. And all of these people have no space to talk about either what happens next or how it ends. Now, according to the New York Times, it may be that the enriched uranium was moved. And so, what happens if the enriched uranium is not destroyed? The regime still has the knowledge of the program despite the assassination of scientists. And let me pose this question. At the moment of the Israeli attack, Benjamin Netanyahu, who cannot be trusted at any level, no more so than Trump.
Let's just pause to
Ben,
point out, Steve, the two worst and most untrustworthy leaders of democratic
uh,
nations in the
uh,
world.
absolutely. Benjamin Netanyahu goes out there and he basically says the same thing that Trump said, which is we obliterated the program, which raises the question, if the Israelis obliterated the program 10 days ago, why did the United States have to obliterate the program on Saturday night? And maybe, just maybe, that the answer to the Israeli obliteration question is the same one to the American obliteration question, that buried deep underground in a bunker, the reactors are still intact. We don't know. And so, whose word is it that we should take? Should I take the word of the president who won't tell me honestly that he lost an election, that he lost hugely in his words? Or should I take the word of the television network that can't tell me the truth about said election, about same insurrection? And at the same time, the Marine Corps has its bayonets pointed outwards at the American people in Los Angeles. So Donald Trump has divided the nation. And here's the deal: MAGA doesn't go to war, the United States goes to war. And these are the most unfit people in the history of the country, times an exponent of 100,000 fucking trillion, to ever put an American soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine into harm's way.
I couldn't agree more. Add one more point to this, which is the way that Netanyahu rolled Trump deserves some comment. Trump told him not to do this. He didn't want him to do this. He did it anyway. Netanyahu went to war with Iran to destroy its nuclear program, knowing that Israel couldn't do it. Why did he go to war if he knew that he couldn't accomplish the goal? Because he knew that despite the fact that the president of the United States didn't want him to do this, he would be able to force, to cajole, to get Trump to change his mind once Israel was engaged in hostilities, that he would have the backing of the useful idiots on Fox News, and that Trump would eventually come around and pull the trigger on the mission that they did over the weekend. And so Netanyahu started a war knowing the only way he could finish was with the United States support, didn't have that support, and he got everything he wanted. Now we're on to the question of what next and regime change. Well, as you pointed out, Steve, a nuclear program is not just the highly enriched uranium. Um, and obviously, huge questions about whether you can get every scrap of enriched uranium in Iran through a bombing campaign. Pretty easy to hide that stuff, especially knowing that, especially since they had weeks to know, or at least days to know that this was coming. So the next argument you're going to hear, and you're already hearing, is that actually the only way to truly take out the Iranians' nuclear program is to take out the regime, because this is a regime hell-bent on getting a bomb, and they're more hell-bent on getting it than ever. If you're the Iranian regime right now, the only thing that's going to defend your country down the road, if they survive this, if they get out of this, is to build a nuclear weapon. That's what the North Koreans learned. That is the lesson of Iraq on the one hand and North Korea on the other. You get invaded if you have a nuclear weapon. You get left alone if you're North Korea and don't and develop a nuclear weapon. So the Iranian regime right now, you're going to start hearing this argument that, well, actually, the only way to finish the job is to take out this regime. Because, and there's some truth to that. There's absolutely truth to that. Because the Iranians Bibi Netanyahu's never going to go for any negotiated deal. We had a deal. The enrichment had stopped when with the international agreement that Trump pulled the United States out of. And so what is the next step here? It's going to be this argument that the Iranians cannot be allowed to build a weapon. They won't. The West will never agree to any negotiation on that. And so you're going to hear the war drums continue. I don't know if it's going to be weeks, months, or years, but you're going to hear the hawks say that this regime has to be destroyed, because that's truly the only way to prevent them from having a nuclear weapon.
In the progression of insanity set loose by the American invasion of Iraq in 2003, you had Al Qaeda in Iraq, and if memory serves, this is Zarqawi is the leader of Al Qaeda in Iraq, and he's so extreme and bloodthirsty and crazed that he's denounced by Al Qaeda too much, too much. And what comes after that is ISIS. And so the idea, as you're literally watching the same people who talked about how U.S. forces would be greeted as liberators in Iraq are now talking about the ease of regime change in Iran and discounting the possibility whatsoever that something more extreme, more dangerous could rise up and take control. In a perfect world,
You can
the
always get something
Iranian
worse.
people, the Iranian people will rise up and overthrow this regime as it's weak. But I think it's very important to understand, going back to what you talked about, is the degree to which Trump was manipulated into this war. And so everything can't be true. Tulsi Gabbard said a few weeks ago that the Iranian program was not at a point of imminence with a nuclear weapon. Right. And that statement, when she delivered it, was not refuted by any other element of the Trump government anywhere. Right. So what is the position? What is the status of the program today? The incentive, as you said, is now to weaponize whatever they have. Enriched uranium doesn't necessarily have to be weaponized in the form of an atomic bomb. There are many deadly uses for it. And again, this is the world's number one state sponsor of terrorism. And there is, again, no plan, no strategy, just bluster, and four fools standing in the White House diplomatic hallway. Pete Hegseth, unfit. Marco Rubio, unfit. JD Vance, unfit. And so the question becomes, at what cost is the regime change worth it as it barrels towards a nuclear weapon, as we now come down this cascading fall of logic, which is that, well, if we miss the program, doesn't it stand to reason that the danger after the failed attack that didn't accomplish the result that it set out to accomplish has risen? And so a really,
Yeah.
really, 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 really dangerous moment where Donald Trump, 157 days into his presidency, after running on peace, is actually tweeting out, "God bless Israel." And I'm a supporter of Israel, and I'm a supporter of Israel's right to defend itself. But I don't want to see an American president tweeting out, "God bless Israel," any more than I do, "God bless Mexico," or England, or Ireland, or Taiwan, or anywhere else in the world. And I particularly don't understand it in the context of the Make America Great Again movement. So again, what we see is somebody who has brainwashed a faction of the country that's a significant plurality, right, or a significant minority that in total adds up to a plurality, that he's some sort of God who can do whatever he wants, that he's unbound by what he did the hour before or an hour from now. And so we're seeing it in real time, and the danger and the potential danger so close to the end of these disasters in Iraq and Afghanistan is just startling to behold. In a society which you could sit and say, wow, just the total absence of any memory on how these things ended within just a couple of years ago. It's
Yeah.
astonishing to me.
It's astonishing, and just to pause for a second on what we know about the Iranians and what they have, because this is just giving me flashbacks to 2003 and the run up to the Iraq War and all the bullshit that was spread um, in that period. Um, we know that they have highly enriched uranium. The reason we know that is because they negotiated a deal with the international community, including the United States, and we had inspectors and cameras and monitors and reporting going on for several years. Then Donald Trump came along and pulled the United States out of that agreement. A year later, the Iranians basically suspended much of the cooperation that they had given the IAEA. Not all of it, but a lot of it. So we had active monitoring. We knew a great deal about the program. Um, so we know that they have highly enriched uranium, up to 60%, right? As everyone knows, you need to get it to 90% to weaponize it. And so there's a lot of confusion because you can, given the facilities that they have or had, take that 60% uranium, put it through the centrifuges, and get some highly enriched 90% enriched uranium. That now they have bomb grade uranium. That's not the end of the story. If you've got a pile of highly enriched uranium enriched to 90%, you don't have a nuclear weapon. And so that is getting confused in the storytelling about what the Iranians have. All the intelligence that the U.S. has reported, and any other intelligence service, with the notable exception of the Israelis, who are highly incentivized to not tell the truth about this, is one that they haven't enriched the uranium to that point, but they could do it in a number of days or weeks. But two, that they don't have an active working weapon or weapon design, or even the authority from the supreme leader to go ahead with a weaponization. And so I see these people on television talking about, oh, the Iranians could have a bomb within days. Now, maybe we're all wrong. Maybe our intelligence sucks. This happened, in the run up to the Gulf War. Saddam Hussein was much closer to a nuclear weapon in the early '90s than we realized. Uh, but having highly enriched uranium does not equal having a nuclear weapon. And I was pointing this out to say this idea that the Iranians were on the edge of nuclear breakout is just made up. It's just made up. And all of a sudden, you turn on the cable news over the preceding days especially after Netanyahu launched this attack, and all these pundits are talking about the fact that the Iranians are on the edge of nuclear breakout and about to have a bomb. It's just total bullshit. you know, Tulsi Gabbard was in front of Congress saying that that's not true. There's nobody in the administration that's contradicted that, and it's just it's crazy how quickly we went from nobody giving a shit, the Iranian nuclear issue being basically status quo, to everyone on TV with their hair on fire saying the Iranians are about to have a nuclear weapon, which was not true, and the intelligence community was telling us it's not true. And now you're going to have Trump, after the fact, making that argument that he took out the Iranian, that it was a weapons program on the verge of success, and that he took it out. So it's really depressing, Steve. We don't the media and the elites in Washington do not learn any lessons when it comes to this, these military interventions. Everything gets simplified down into just idiot terms, and it encourages the worst behavior of leaders, and in this case, encourages Donald Trump to think that he can push a button and this problem will go away, and he doesn't realize how many new problems he just created.
I think that one of the lessons, and I remember this very well, for example, during the John McCain campaign, and McCain's position that all through the 2007 period as he's coming back, John McCain campaign collapsed, and John McCain embraces as really his primary. This is, I'm running for this, and he says over and over again 10 million times, I would much rather lose an election than see this country lose another war. And the other war was the Vietnam War that he was referring to, that his generation's war. And he talked about, we have to send more troops to Iraq. And his fundamental message was, it doesn't matter if you were for the war or if you were against the war. We are at war in Iraq, and we're there in Iraq, and the only way out is through, not back. And so there were a lot of Democrats, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, who voted for that war. And once you start a war, politically, it's always easy for the other side to be like, oh, not us. But political parties don't go to war, countries do. And so the question that none of these people, none of these dishonest charlatans like Scott Jennings or any of these war hawks are talking about is what's next. If the assessment, as it seems to be the case, is that the bombing, though devastating, was not decisive. And so a big explosion in the mountain does not equal the destruction of the program. And so if sending
Yep.
125 aircraft to destroy the program leads to a result where the program is not destroyed, what is the implication of that?
The implication is that, um, Netanyahu sits back, praises Trump. Well, go ahead, finish what you were gonna say.
No, no, no. I was like, go ahead. I was saying it
Yeah.
seems like we have some audio problems with some people, but maybe.
Here, let me look. Can't hear Steve. I could hear you fine. Other people said you were, coming in and out. Steve,
Okay, still no there.
I can hear
Or just
him.
a little. Okay.
Let me let me see what's going on. Um, no audio. Let's see. Can you guys hear? Can you guys hear me speaking right
Okay.
now?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All right.
Okay.
I think there was some screen lock. That's what it was. So it's all
Okay.
good. All right. Anyway, the implications are, um, Netanyahu praises Trump, uh, pats him on the back, does all the things you need to do, uh, for Trump to, stay loyal to you, um, and he waits until, this argument about what to do next to actually, destroy the program, becomes more ripe, and looks for an opportunity to press forward with this argument that it's the regime that has to be brought down in some way. Um, and before that happens, Steve, there's going to be an Iranian response. Does anyone think there's not going to be an Iranian response? Does anyone think the Iranians are just going to be like, okay, uh, that's the end of it? No chance. And you and I know when there's an Iranian response, it could be a terrorist attack in an American city, given their history. It could be a bunch of missiles that get lucky and don't get taken out and hit one of the 40,000, and hit some of the 40,000 troops we have within range of their missiles in the Middle East. It could be taking out a U.S. flagged ship or military ship. Um, and what's the pressure going to be from Fox News, from the most hawkish voices in Congress, and from a good percentage of the punditry in Washington when the Iranians retaliate? We're going to start climbing that escalatory ladder. People are going to want blood. People are going to want to hit back. And then you're going to hear the argument, you know what? This is the way the Iranians are. This isn't going to end. Now we're at war with Iran and we've got to take the regime out. The luckiest thing in the world, to me, the only way out where that doesn't happen is the Iranian response is so minimal, and they let it be known that it's the end of it, and they are desperate to enter into some kind of diplomatic conversation. But otherwise, the next shoe to drop is retaliation and bloodlust from the usual suspects in the United States, and then we really are at war.
Yeah, that's the thing. And honest to God, I mean, I can't I mean, you take out all the people that are incarcerated and institutionalized and just in a broad general sweep, the 10% of the most fucked up people in the country, right? After you take all of them out of the competition, I honestly I can't imagine finding four people, right? Plus one, like a basketball team, right? A Tulsi Gabbard, a Hegseth, a Little Marco, a JD Vance, and a Trump. We have 352 million people in this country. I just took 35 million of them, the dregs, right? The worst of the worst out of consideration, right? So after that, I can't imagine an alignment of four worse people that you would want to have lead anything, let alone the United States into a hot war against Iran in the Middle East with all sorts of implications because this war, of course, has some real significant bearing on what's going on in Ukraine and other points across the world. But
Yeah.
these people are dishonest. They are incompetent. And the point of Pete Hegseth, I think psychologically fucked up. This is a guy who's trailed around in the Pentagon by his wife everywhere, uh, disorganized, chaotic, just absolute disaster. And you see, right, kind of the bloody fingerprints of the access journalism. Some of it at CNN, some of it in some of the corporate media papers. All of them all of a sudden now heralding the precision of the strike. The great warlord Pete Hegseth has found his footing, and you just sit there and you say, "Holy shit!" Right? Just you can't make it up. Really, really, really astonishing.
Yeah. No, we're in a bad place. I see some of the comments, people saying, the Iranian regime is stunned and must focused on domestic stability and can't risk war with the US. Um, let's hope that's their response. Because if they
Well,
re- if they re- yeah.
let's hope the regime topples. Let's hope the regime topples, right? I'm not, Trump is
I don't know if I
gambling.
yeah.
Trump is gambling with our money, with the lives of America's kids. And so, like, let's hope that the regime topples and we have a restoration of Iranian democracy. But, look,
Well, yeah.
what, like, like,
Remember, you can
like
always get something
history
worse though.
teaches us, history should teach us to have a little fucking humility about the pronouncements on a 20-year basis here. There's a lot of happiness in the Iranian diaspora in the United States.
Yeah.
A lot of enthusiasm. The regime is weak, but again, what's the plan? And there's no
Absolutely.
plan. There's no strategy. What there is, as I detailed at the beginning of the conversation, is the top seven people involved in national security have all contradicted themselves. That I could sit here for the next 15 minutes that we have left and detail again all 47 different contradictions. But to what point? Other than to point out that these people do not have their shit together, even if they hit the lucky X mark, which it appears they did not hit. And they only have 8 of these weapons left if the arsenal count that's public is how many of these weapons we have, which were 20 of them, and 12 of them were just used.
Yeah. Um, Steve, bunch of people in the comments curious about Congress's reaction, and I don't know what to say about it. Look, Congress is controlled by Republicans. They have they had absolutely no interest in having a debate about this. Absolutely no interest in um, putting forward a war resolution to authorize this strike and actually have the fucking debate about whether this is a good idea or not. There was literally zero debate in this country about whether this was a good idea, zero debate about the potential consequences. Um, most people in this country are not paying close attention to politics. They're going to work. They see Israel's at war striking Iran. And the next thing they know, the United States is dragged into it with absolutely no discussion, no debate, nothing. I mean, at least we had a war resolution and a debate in 2003 with respect to Iraq. As wrong as everyone was, at least there was a debate. As much as politicians lied or were fed bad information, at least there was a conversation. And frankly, some of the worst case scenarios were mentioned in that debate. With this, absolutely nothing. And the way that the press framed the whole thing was this is just, these really cool bombs with a really cool name, and only the United States has them, and we're going to go blow up this mountain and wash our hands of it. That was the extent of the debate. Should Trump blow up the nuclear mountain or not? That was how this was framed in the press. Um, None of the follow-on conversation about, well, what happens next? What if you don't get all the stuff? What if the Iranians come back at us in 16 different ways? And Republicans didn't want to have that debate. A bunch of, few Democrats, some louder than others, demanded it. At the end of the day, they don't control Congress. There's not a whole lot they could do. Um, what's your view of this? What should Democrats do? I mean, we know what Republicans do. Republicans are sit on their hands, ask zero questions. With the exception of a few kind of cranky libertarians, um, and and Democrats, I can see the Schumers of the world thinking, well, there's nothing that's going to happen anyway. Let's just move on and go back to talking about healthcare.
So, I mean, a couple of things. The reality is that this terrible political MAGA movement, this divisive, rancid, teeming with violence, incompetent, disgraceful, immoral political movement came to power by winning an election against the leadership of people like Chuck Schumer. Period. Period. People want change. And so Democrats across America who are going to run in 26 have to run against the Washington, D.C. leadership of their party. There are some outstanding Democratic congressmen, like Jake Auchincloss. Uh, Everybody who's on should go to Simple, Not Easy, one of the best Substacks there is, Congressman Auchincloss. These are the guys, and there's women like Mikey Sherrill and Jocelyn Benson and Abigail Spanberger. There are governors like J.B. Pritzker who get what's going on and have been tough as nails. There are a lot of people who get it. And so these leaders like Schumer are feckless. And I spoke at a synagogue in New Jersey this week in Montclair. I was with the former Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, had a very different conception of the job. And I mauled Chuck Schumer like a grizzly bear on this point. and 400 people got on their feet and cheered. And so today, really the first candidate running for a Democratic primary in the state, Colonel Terry Virts, Virts in Texas. Terry Virts is a guy who, by the old standards of the country, was measured to have the right stuff. He was an Air Force fighter pilot of 45 combat missions. He was a test pilot, a NASA astronaut who commanded the International Space Station. And Terry Virts announced his candidacy for the U.S. Senate in Texas today. And it's a great ad that introduces Terry Virts to people in Texas and to the country. And he talks about change, and he explicitly makes clear in the ad that it's time for Schumer to go. And so this is important. And this is long overdue to have this conversation. But in 26, Democrats have to repudiate this 119th Congress, this do nothing Congress, and they have to ask for a check on Trump. They have to say to the American people, give us power to put a check on this craziness. And that's the campaign.
Wait, so tell me a little bit more about Terry Virts. So he's running for Senate. I'm just looking at his bio here. NASA astronaut, U.S. Air Force F-16 pilot, running for U.S. Senate from the great state of Texas. Um, and so, what's the deal there? The Schumer, the Democrats. Who is their preferred candidate, if there is one? And what's the deal with the race there?
Well, I think the Schumercrats, the guys who run the committee, say, hey, we want Colin Allred, who's the former House member, and he's leading the $20 million study on how Democrats should talk to men. He's the committee candidate. And um, I think Colin Allred's a very fine man. He was on my podcast, and he told a great story. And the story was that he was in an NFL game. He was an NFL football player and had his career-ending injury and was really aware of it. And he was down at the bottom of the pile and he knew it was over. And I asked him about it. And I said, what were you thinking? And he had no self-pity whatsoever. He just said, my only thought was I'm going to go to law school. And he went to law school and he joined the Obama administration. He got elected to Congress and he ran for the U.S. Senate against Ted Cruz and he lost by 8 points. And I think he did the very best that he could do. And Texas is a state where um, the voters are harsh in that they're not inclined to give their statewide candidates a second look.
Hmm.
You either make it or you don't. And so you can go back all the way to Texas statehood, but you've never had a candidate who's lost on a statewide ballot, who's come back and won the election for the same office. And so, except for John Tower, who in 1960 is defeated by LBJ, who is on the ballot as both the vice president and as the senator. And John Tower comes back to win the special election not so long after a political disaster in the Kennedy administration recalled, I think, is the Bay of Pigs. So um, you have you have, I think, in the country, and people are going to have to look at this, is do you want new people? Right. I like the idea of a guy who's an Air Force colonel, test pilot, who's saying, hey, I want to be a Democrat, but I'm not part of this madness that went on in 24 that's gone on in the last couple of years. I believe in the party of Barack Obama and John Kennedy and Franklin Roosevelt of working people and ordinary people, and I'm going to fight and I'm going to be on their side and to see what happens. But on my stuff, right, on my platforms, people will say over and over again, well, what are you going to do about it? Right? What are you going to say about this? Right? Like, how are you going to actually do something to make a difference? And you have a guy here, right, who could do a lot of things in life, right? Like, we love astronauts in this country. And he's saying, hey, I want to serve in the US Senate. I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to make a case to people. I'm going to pitch them and I'm going to say, right? That, hey, I'm going through this selection process here. And Terry's a friend of mine, right? That's how he talks about it, right? He's going through a selection process and he's made it through some tough selection process. I think he thinks about this as the toughest one, but he's going to go out and he said, I'm gonna talk straight and I'm gonna tell it to people like it is. I'm gonna put, the country first. And he says in this ad that, I'm an American first, a proud Texan second, and a common sense Democrat third. And, it made me think about John McCain. And, we could use some hellraisers in the US Senate. And, you know, I'm walking in the rain last week,
Same.
you know, with Terry, right, in Washington. We're down on these monuments and he said something to me, and it was just I just thought it was deep, and he goes, "Well," he goes, "You know why Neil Armstrong was picked to be the first guy to land on the moon?" And I go, "I guess he was the best pilot." And he goes, "Well, no." He goes, listen," he goes, "They were all great pilots, right? All those, all that generation of Apollo astronauts, and they were all great." So that Neil Armstrong was picked because Neil Armstrong was known for his judgment. And he said, when you go to space and you do these things, what you're constantly put into a vice on is a test of judgment under pressure. And the argument that I would make is that we need some more people with better judgment, right? Like, I'd like to send a guy up there to sit next to Mark Kelly, right? And here's the deal for Democrats, right? And this is one of the great failures of the leaders of the Democratic National Committee, the great failures of Schumer, one of the great failures of Jamie Harrison. They have turned the great Democratic Party into a regional party, and it must be a national party, and it must be able to compete in places that elected people like Barbara Jordan and Ann Richards and David Boren in Oklahoma and John Glenn in Ohio. It has to be a great national party. And so Texas is going to be the largest state in the country by population, and the Democrats can't write it off because the 4 year get on your knees and pray to God, right, that you get to 270 plus one by some fucking miracle, or we have fascism, doesn't work for a lot of us anymore. So we gotta be enthusiastic about the new people. And Terry Virts, he really has, my admiration and my respect for being an astronaut, being the space station commander, being a test pilot, a combat pilot, but being a Texas man who says, hey, I'm a Democrat. I'm not running as an independent. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to work to renew this party. What I'm going to do is work to rehabilitate it in a state like Texas. And what I'm going to do is go give it a new brand and a new identity. And it's a big mission. It's a big journey ahead for the guy. But man, I wish him luck. And I hope all of you do. But it's Terry, Terry Virts, Virts.
Last thing, Steve, I want to give you a chance to talk about a new group you've started called the Save America Movement. As we wrap up the hour here, what is the Save America movement, and how
Well,
can
I'm
people
gonna I'm
get
gonna
get involved?
thanks for asking about it. You can find the Save America movement on Substack, on Facebook, and everywhere you get social media. It's Verts, spelled V as in Victor, IRTS in Texas. But check out Terry Verts, Colonel Terry Verts. United States Air Force, NASA astronaut. The Save America movement is coming together. We put out our first ads. Those ads uh, target and communicate to the Marines in Los Angeles and to all the soldiers in Washington. It reminded them about the nature of illegal orders and their constitutional oaths. Um, we have, uh, since launching, have 7,000 donors, average donation $22. We're putting together a great steering committee. And two of the people I just would like to briefly mention, you can find them on Substack. One of them, well, three of them actually. One of them is the one and only Bishop William Barber, a profoundly important moral voice in America. One of them is the Reverend Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, who is Bishop Barber's indispensable partner. And one of them is Ryan Busey. I want you to think about what Bishop Barber talks about is fusion politics. I want you to think about the power of a black minister, Bishop Barber, and somebody who started out in the white evangelical movement, joining forces with the cowboys in Montana, Ryan Busey, and all of the groups fighting for public lands in demanding that the provisions that sell off 130 million public land acres that belong to all of us, right? If you're the poorest black kid in the poorest project in this country or the poorest white kid in a trailer somewhere, you own that land as surely as they do, as surely as Bezos does, we own. And the strangest senator of the whole bunch, Mike Lee from Utah, this amoral man, everybody saw what he did after Minnesota, this nihilistic attack that the Marxists did it. He's like Arthur Fleck from the Joker, and he's in the U.S. Senate. He is behind this sell-off of 130 million public acres, and you had the Montana senators who were able to protect Montana at the expense of Idaho. The amount of land being sold around Jackson Hole, around the Tetons in Utah, astonishing. The evisceration of the land around Tahoe and the Sierra and all of the small California mountain towns, which are a national treasure. What the Save America movement is about is bringing together a diverse coalition. And we have public health experts, we have public land fighters, we have a arts coalition, we have an advertising committee. And so as all sorts of people are coming together as we begin to operate, what we seek to do is to build a movement of millions of followers and hundreds of thousands of donors that plants a flag in the south and the west of the country and connects it to all 50 states, and that demands reform in the Democratic Party and a vision for better, and connects Americans in a grassroots populist organization that seeks to lead an uprising against the corrupt status quo so that we may get back to the business of perfecting the union and come off of this detour and be in a position to hand off to our kids and to our grandkids a country that is stronger than the one we were born into, because that is a fundamental moral proposition in the United States, as is freedom, as is liberty. And if you go to the Save America Movement Substack website, you're going to see some incredibly eloquent writing on that subject by Bishop Barber. And I encourage you to join, sign up, do what you can, subscribe to these places, read and share these postings as we get ready for two of the most decisive elections in the entire history of the country that are going to determine our liberty and our freedom against this tyrant.
Steve, all right, thank you for that. And I just want to say, as we've been talking here for the last few minutes, I'm looking at the New York Times right now. Iran has started firing missiles aimed. I'm going to read the Times report on this. Iran fired missiles aimed at an American base in Qatar, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, according to three Iranian officials with knowledge of the matter. A senior White House official earlier confirmed that the United States was aware of of a potential attack by Iran against the airbase. Um, Israeli official also said Iran was poised to strike the base. Um, we don't know a lot more than that right now, according to what I'm looking at. But the Iranian response has started, and it's our largest military installation in the Middle East. There's no more information that I'm seeing on here than that. So here we go. This is what we were talking about a few minutes ago, and again, this is this is why this is not even we're not even at the end of the beginning here. We're at the very, very beginning. And this is what happens when you bomb another country. They retaliate. And then Americans who all the polls show don't want to be at war with Iran, they don't like seeing Americans get attacked. And there will be pressure on Trump to respond. And that's when we get into a really, really bad place. So the Iranian retaliation has begun.
It's begun, and just a quick reminder for everybody is that after the Soleimani assassination, which was carried out during the first Trump terms, the Iranians retaliated, and what the American people were told is that the missiles hit and that there was no damage and that was it, no wounded. But that wasn't the truth. You had dozens of Americans that were wounded by those attacks. That fact was covered up by the administration that did not want to deal with the escalatory aspects of this. But the Iranian regime has a lot of different things that they can do in this moment to respond, and a lot of them will require a further American response and retaliation. So let's just go back 48 hours. And again, I just
And look, that's what we got. I
couple of
mean,
data, a couple of data
this is a this is a heavily fortified, defended base. It has, obviously the state of the art air defenses, and so the best case scenario is a limited. Sorry, I got an insect here. A limited Iranian response, and that's the end of it. But anyway, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Netanyahu said the program was destroyed, but the program was not destroyed. And then the United States bombed. And Trump said the program was destroyed. And Hegseth said the program was destroyed. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, we don't know if the program is destroyed. And then everyone else contradicted themselves. But let's look at the second part of what Pete Hegseth said. Deterrence has been reestablished. If deterrence had been reestablished, then Iran would dare not fire any missiles at an American base. So 125 aircraft at this hour on Monday, as that fog of war, as the smoke clears, we know as of Monday that the 125 aircraft that were sent on this mission to reestablish deterrence, not according to Steve Schmidt, but to Secretary Champagne Pete and his wife Jenny, that deterrence was reestablished, but deterrence was not reestablished, and that the nuclear program was obliterated, but it may be the case that the nuclear program was not obliterated. And so now Iran is attacking a U.S. base in Qatar, which, if you look at the level of corruption and corrupt acts between Qatar and the United States, specifically Donald Trump and the administration and the obscenity of that tour, and you look at the plans for the Trump hotel properties, I just wonder if the twin brother of the 18-year-old Marine deployed in Los Angeles might be dying in the Middle East for a Trump property he's
This is the
aspiring to
right.
build on the Golden Coast of Qatar. So I
This is
I
the
would
problem.
just
This
I
is the
would just
problem.
say that the dishonesty and the corruption is disqualifying, and there is no moment, including the darkest, lowest, weakest days of this country during my lifetime, after Watergate, after the helicopters flew off the roof of Saigon, after the Mayaquez incident, after all of that, rock fucking bottom, desert one. There's no moment ever in 50 years' time where this country is less prepared at every conceivable level to be fighting a war. Are
Absolutely.
you kidding me? We are divided, we are decaying, we are weak, and we are led by corrupt and dishonest men and women who have no moral right to yoke the armed forces and our young men and women to their delusions, to their fantasies, and to their bloodlust, to their lies about what it is that they said that they would do if they were given political power. It took them 157 days to have the whole world in fucking chaos and to have the economy on the decline, to have the American people in absolute fear, to have a lawless assault on the Constitution with a military assault on our most formidable enemy. But somehow, over 40 years, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Joe Biden,
Yeah.
and even Donald Trump 45 managed to go without bombing Iran. But here we are because Donald Trump is out of control. He's lost control of events and himself, and that's what we're watching play out.
And just another point on this, of course, in Trump over the weekend, Trump said if Iran retaliates, um, he warned Iran against retaliating and said that the United States would meet such retaliation. I don't have the language in front of me, but with something to the effect of, overwhelming force. It was a very stark warning. Um, and one thing he said is that the U.S. retaliation would be far greater than what we have witnessed over the last 8 days. So
Shocking.
those words are going to be thrown back. Now, fortunately, Trump's word means nothing in this case. Fortunately,
Yeah, it means
um,
nothing. That's right.
but those words are going to be thrown back in his face by the hawks, who will say, "You see, the Iranians are shooting our military bases, and this requires retaliation." And Trump himself has promised retaliation far greater than what we have witnessed. Um, and that's what we have to be deeply, deeply worried about here. And just looking to see if there's anything else.
I just
Yeah,
know this.
stop.
I'll tell you what, if I was a Chinese
Yeah,
general around Xi Jinping, I'd be like, we invade Taiwan tomorrow. The time has come.
absolutely, absolutely. We're
The
distracted.
time has come.
We're absolutely distracted. Um, and all the efforts on Russia and Ukraine have gone out the window. He gave Putin a 2 week deadline that came and went, and there's no energy, no political capital being spent on that. He got dragged into this against his wishes, and he better hope the Iranians have the good sense to limit their retaliation, or we're going to be in a very, very ugly war. Steve, let's get off, and we're coming up on over an hour.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you for doing this. I want to just since I want to put out an appeal to your we have 2.6 thousand people watching this right now. It's a good turnout for a Substack Live, and I want to hope you all enjoy Steve and I doing these every Monday. I certainly love talking to Steve. It was great to see him in person in Washington last week. And if you like these, please check out Tellus News. And I'm going to put something in the chat, and that is a special link. I just put it in there. It's www.tellus.news/Steve. If you subscribe, if you're a paid subscriber to Tellus News with that link, you can get 20% off. And I'll keep that link going. So
All right.
uh, thank you so much to everyone. We'll see you back here Monday. See you,
Good
man.
to see you all. Take care.